Before we begin, I want to be clear how I'm going to do this and why. I'm assuming you have PTSD and that your body can react physically, sometimes without warning. So this will not be a typical hypnosis session. In hypnosis, there are different systems that can be addressed. One system is logical and analytical. It works with language, sequence, and structure. The other system is imagination-based. It works with imagery, symbolism, and internal experience. In many hypnosis sessions, the logical system is addressed first, and the imagination-based system is engaged later. However, because physical reactivity is present, we're not going to activate the imagination-based system in this session. Imagination-based hypnosis can sometimes trigger physical responses, and that's not what we want here. So this session is intentionally designed to use only the logical dominant hemisphere. The logical side prefers structure, sequence, and predictability. It does not generate imagery. It does not require emotional involvement. For many people with PTSD, this type of trance is more comfortable and more stable. So this will be a logical trance. Before we continue, there's one more thing I want you to know. Many of you are familiar with my usual voice style. You may notice on this track, I don't sound the way I normally do. I won't be using melody in my voice. I won't be sing-talking. I won't be using emotional tone. That is intentional. Melody and vocal musicality tend to engage the imagination-based system. And on this track, we are deliberately avoiding that. Instead, I'll use rhythm, structure, and changes in speed. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. That keeps communication in the logical system. So if my voice feels more neutral, more direct, or more mechanical than usual, that is not a mistake. That's part of how this trance works. You don't have to picture anything. You don't have to feel anything special. You don't have to relax. All you need to do is listen and follow along in a straightforward way. Most people already know how to do that. Right now, you're listening. That's already happening. Perfect. We'll start with something simple and familiar. Counting. I'm going to ask you to begin counting silently in your head, starting at 1. Just 1. Then 2. then 3. There's no goal number. Don't need to reach anything. Counting doesn't require imagination. It doesn't require belief. It doesn't require emotion. It's just sequence. As you continue counting, 4, 5, 6, you may notice the pace stays steady, or you may notice small pauses. Either way is fine. The logical mind understands sequence. While you're counting, 7, 8, 9, I'll continue talking. The logical part of your brain can handle both at the same time. People do this every day. As counting continues, 10, 11, 12, you may notice that your body is supported. The chair supports you. The floor supports you. Gravity is consistent. You don't have to do anything to make that happen. If you notice physical sensations while counting, 13, 14, 15, that's okay. Noticing isn't reacting. Sensations occur, change, and pass. You don't need to control your breathing. It's already happening. As counting continues, 16, 17, 18, many people notice it starts to require less effort. That's normal. The brain is automating a familiar task. As the numbers continue, 19, 20, 21, attention often becomes more selective. Some thoughts matter less. Some sounds become irrelevant. That's not disassociation. That's focused attention. Now, while counting continues quietly in the background, 22, 23, I want to be clear about something. When I refer to an earlier context, I'm not asking you to relive anything. There is no emotional memory work here. No replaying, no imagery. By earlier context, I mean a general reference point. A time before your nervous system learned certain patterns. You don't need details. Just allow the idea of before to exist conceptually is enough. If nothing comes to mind, while you continue counting, 24, 25, that's fine. The concept works whether or not it's conscious. As counting continues, 26, 27, you may notice moments of physical neutrality, not comfort, just neutral. No urgency, nothing needing to happen. That neutrality is important. Each time it's noticed, while numbers continue quietly, it becomes easier to recognize again. That's how anchors form, through repetition. You're not trying to create anything. you're just allowing familiar processes, counting, listening, observing, to continue. As you continue counting quietly, whatever number you're at now, it may be useful to understand what the logical side of the brain actually enjoys. This is the dominant hemisphere. It manages the full language system, syntax, grammar, sequence, order. It processes words linearly and prefers structure. It also responds to tempo, not emotional tone, just timing. That's why counting works well here. It gives the dominant hemisphere something it naturally organises. This side of the brain also controls the contralateral side of the body. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere controls the left side. That relationship is consistent and predictable. Predictability reduces unnecessary activation, so as counting continues and language continues, the dominant hemisphere remains engaged. When this system stays active long enough, certain experiences occur naturally, not because they are induced, but because they are normal consequences of focused logical attention. You may notice moments where attention feels stronger and moments where it feels weaker. That's normal. Attention doesn't stay constant. It shifts. And the logical mind understands variability as counting continues. You may also notice the entrance experience. You may also notice the trance experience of motor or verbal inhibition. This doesn't mean paralysis, it simply means there is less impulse to move or speak, because movement and speech are not currently required, just as when reading quietly, the body tends to remain still without effort. That's inhibition through relevance, not control. Another natural consequence of trance is what is often called trance logic. This means ideas can coexist without needing to be evaluated, not judged, not tested. The logical mind temporarily reduces reality testing because nothing here requires decision making. You are not being asked to act, respond, or solve anything. So evaluation becomes unnecessary. At the same time, the dominant hemisphere continues to process. language without imagery. Words remain words. Concepts remain concepts. This allows symbolic processing. Without visualization, a word can represent an idea without turning into a picture. That is still logic. As counting continues, you may notice time distortion. Not losing time, not disorientation, just noticing that time feels slightly different in trance, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. That happens whenever attention is focused. The logical mind tracks sequence, but subjective time adjusts. That's normal. And later, some people notice spontaneous amnesia, not forgetting important things, not loss of control, just reduce recall for parts of the hypnosis experience that were not relevant, because the dominant hemisphere stores information based on usefulness. If something isn't needed, it doesn't stay foregrounded. That's efficient, and efficiency is a function of logic. Throughout all of this, counting can continue quietly in the background. You don't need to track the number consciously anymore. The sequence runs on its own. That's automation, and automation is one of the dominant hemisphere's strengths. While counting continues quietly, it may be useful to understand something about how this logical system develops. Not everyone has access to it in the same way. Some people experience brain injury early in life, sometimes in infancy or childhood, that affects the dominant hemisphere. When that happens, the full language system may not develop in the usual way. These individuals may have difficulty with syntax, grammar, sequencing, or structured verbal reasoning. From a neurological standpoint, this is not a failure. It's a difference in available resources. In those cases, the brain adapts. The non-dominant hemisphere often takes on functions it wouldn't normally carry. Language may emerge through melody rather than syntax. Meaning may be processed through sensation rather than words. Time may be experienced non-linearly. That adaptation is called plasticity. But plasticity is not chaos. It is organised reassignment. This contrast highlights something important. When the dominant logical hemisphere is available, it becomes an exceptionally stable anchor. It allows experience to remain structured, attention to stay ordered, processing to remain predictable. That is why we're using it here. You are not required to compensate. You are not required to reorganize. You already have access to the system that prefers sequence, language, and order. And that system can support trance without imagery, without emotion, and without physical activation. This is not avoidance. It is structured attention. And structured attention is one of the safest forms of trance. As counting continues quietly, it's important to clarify something. The goal here is not to avoid the creative side forever. The goal is choice. People with PTSD and physical reactivity do best when they can move between systems deliberately rather than being pulled automatically into one. Counting is your primary return mechanism. If anything feels less structured than you want, you simply continue counting more deliberately. That immediately re-engages the logical system. Not effort, not correction, just sequence. With that safety mechanism in place, it becomes possible to engage the creative side in a controlled, regulated way, not through imagery, not through memory, not through emotion, but through bilateral activity. While counting continues, you may allow gentle side-to-side eye movement, left, right, left, right, or light alternate tapping of your hands, right hand, left hand, right, left. This engages both sides of the body in a predictable, contralateral pattern. The logical system maintains sequence. The creative system receives rhythm and variation. Neither takes over. The creative side is not leading. It is participating. And because counting never stops, you can return fully to structure at any moment, simply by emphasizing the numbers again. This is regulation, not exposure, participation, not immersion. Nothing needs to be imagined. Nothing needs to be revisited. the creative side is allowed to register, not generate, as counting continues quietly in the background and structure remains available. This is where certain changes may begin to occur. They are normal, they are temporary, they unfold in sequence. The first change is often recognition, not memory, not replay, just a noticing. You may become aware that some thoughts, assumptions, or physical reactions are stronger than they need to be, exaggerated, incomplete, or simply outdated. Nothing needs to be done with that information. No emotional response is required. Recognition alone is sufficient. As counting continues and bilateral rhythm remains steady, the hypnosis experience naturally moves to the next phase. Information remains accessible, but the charge reduces. Facts without reaction. Data without urgency. You are not distancing yourself. You are separating content from intensity. That is not avoidance. That is regulation. As this separation stabilizes, another change may occur. A quiet form of catharsis, not release through expression, not discharge, just a reduction. A sense that pressure is lower than it was before. Nothing dramatic, nothing external, simply less effort required to hold things in place. As pressure reduces, the system gains flexibility. This is where using the trance experience, dimensional shifting of representation, can begin. The same idea, now held at a different distance, not gone, not denied, less foreground, more background. As distance adjusts, attention reorganizes, focus shifts, memory content reorders, nothing erased, nothing rewritten, just reorganized. Some representations lose dominance, others become more available. This amplification of alternate representations. You are not replacing meaning. You are allowing additional options to exist alongside original ones. And throughout all of this, counting continues quietly. Sequence remains intact. Structure stays available. Nothing has been forced. Nothing has been taken away. This is simply what happens when regulation is maintained and the system is allowed to complete its own adjustments. These are not commands. They are observations your system may notice later. You are free to ignore them, test them, or discard them. At some point in the future, when you are bowling in cricket using your right hand, you may notice something interesting. If you sing while bowling, timing and coordination may be slightly disrupted, and you might miss the wicket. If you are talking instead, simple speech, not melody, coordination improves. That's because conversational language supports sequencing without competing for rhythm. Nothing to force, nothing to change. Just information becoming available when it's useful. At a football game in a setting where structure already exists, rules, timing, shared focus, you may notice something else. Singing a little louder, joining rhythmically with the crowd, or allowing vocal energy to rise can engage creative contribution without loss of control. That creative engagement, when structure is already present, may give your team a subtle advantage. Again, nothing required, just optional participation. Any time you deliberately begin counting, even briefly, your system knows how to return to structure. Sequence increases, reactivity decreases automatically. Perfect. In a moment we'll complete this process. Nothing is being undone. Nothing is being lost. You are simply shifting from structured internal attention back to ordinary outward awareness. We'll do that by counting backward from 10 to 1. Backward counting signals completion. Sequence remains intact as attention reorients outward. 10. Awareness begins to broaden. 9. Listening remains clear. 8. Energy levels normalize naturally. 7. Muscle tone adjusts, movement is available again. 6. Orientation returns fully to the room. 5. Attention balances evenly, internal and external, and here it's appropriate to acknowledge something. You stayed engaged. You followed sequence. You participated deliberately. That matters. 4. The logical system remains fully online. 3. Eyes may blink or refocus naturally, and it's worth noting, without emotion, that working with a reactive nervous system and maintaining structure is a skill. You demonstrated that skill. 2. This trance is complete. The method remains available. 1. Fully awake, fully oriented, simply here. Perfect. Before continuing with your day, there's one final acknowledgement. You chose to participate. You stayed within the structure. You worked with your system instead of against it. That deserves recognition. No emotion required, just acknowledgement. I showed up. I stayed structured. That was enough. Thank you for engaging at your own pace and maintaining control throughout. You can now continue normally. And remember, you're perfect, just as you are.